I missed the ball. I must have lifted my head. I topped it. I must have lifted my head. I caught those ground. I must have lifted my head. I sliced it. I must have lifted my head. Every single bad shot that we hit, what's the main excuse that you use? You lifted your head. Well, here's the proof today that it's absolutely nothing to do with your head or if you're looking at the ball or not. It's to do with something else. Before we start, don't forget, hit that link below to my website to get on the waiting list for lessons with myself here at Whitby Park Golf Club. We've heard it numerous times. We've lifted our head and that's why we top it, or we might even miss the ball, mostly because we top it or we slice it out there. We feel like we've lifted our head up and out and taken our eye off the golf ball. But that is absolutely not the case. And in fact, if anything, in 25 years of teaching, I'd probably say one person out of all the people I've ever taught, that's a fair few, has lifted their head far too soon and tried to look up way out there. It's very, very rare. And the reason it's so popular is because it's such a cliche and it's just sort of passed through generations and generations of golfers to say, oh, you've lifted your head. Because a lot of people say, oh, you've got to keep your head down. You've got to keep looking at that golf ball. You've got to really keep that head down. But it is not strictly true. First question here is, does the ball know we're looking at it? It hasn't got a clue. It has not got a single clue that we're looking at it. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, a lot of you out there are going to shout at your screens now to say, hang on, you have to look at that golf ball. Don't get me wrong. Of course you are going to look at that golf ball. You're not just going to set up to the golf ball like this and keep looking at your target there. Okay. Common sense tells us we're going to look at that golf ball because you know what? It's still an object we've got to hit. So we are going to naturally, commonsensically look down on that golf ball just down there. So we don't actually need to necessarily tell ourselves or tell anyone else to look at the golf ball because we're going to look at it here. But it's during the swing that you think you've lifted your head or you've taken your eye off the golf ball. Now, here's the problem with trying to keep your head down. Because if we think about this, the golf swing is actually more of a swing as opposed to a hit. We're not trying to necessarily hit the golf ball. We're trying to swing the golf club and the golf ball just gets in the way of our swing. It gets in the way of our golf club. So what should happen there is this golf club should swing through that ball and through towards that target. The problem with keeping your head down when we're trying to swing the golf club, we can't. Why? Because the problem is if we're trying to keep our head so far down and looking at that golf ball, we can't move the club through the space towards that target. So we end up really constricted on the way through and therefore actually really struggling to get the club underneath that ball. Therefore, actually, I've seen a lot more people hit worse shots trying to keep their head down because they're trying to swing at the ball as opposed to through the ball on that way through. So keeping your head down is really, really absolute nonsense when we start to look down into the nooks and crannies of it and try and really get to know and understand how the golf swing works. Because remember, we've got to swing that golf club through that ball. We don't want to hit at that golf ball. So don't try and keep your head down and absolutely dead still and stable, because the problem is you're going to encounter more bad shots than good shots. And that is a guarantee. You have to make sure you're swinging through that ball as opposed to at the ball for much greater success. And the strikes will be a lot sweeter.